Hi, welcome. If you're ever dealing with Chinese business partners, whether in person in China or across the seas in a video conference, and you're looking for decisions to be made in your meeting, you're probably looking in the wrong place. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about my experience in dealing with Chinese business partners, whether that's been through supply chain or joint ventures where we're actually sharing the same business goals. The Chinese meeting is very different from the Western meeting. That is, what's expected or targeted to happen inside that meeting has very, very different approaches and results. So let's talk about the Western perspective, the area that I grew up in and spent most of my career dealing in meetings and what they meant and what they accomplished. This was probably many of your experience as well, but we expect a meeting to be a time where we debate things, where we make decisions, we finalize ideas. There is a healthy exchange of ideas. We will go back and forth on, methods, alternatives, options. People are not necessarily personally vested. Well, to some extent we might be, but there's not an entire sense of self-worth tied up in your one idea that you're proposing. And it is typically looked at as a healthy way to have alternate views and come to best solutions and best progresses forward. So we approach the meeting as a way to evolve a decision and reach a common goal. And if that doesn't happen in a meeting with our Chinese partners, it feels ineffective, or the Chinese business partners are maybe being evasive or don't want to commit to something. And so it can be very frustrating from the Westerners in the room because it doesn't feel like any progress is being made. Sometimes it feels like the meeting's just moving slowly. We're not getting anywhere. Nothing's being advanced or nothing's being finalized. And it's not really the purpose or the approach from the Chinese partners. It's a different system entirely. So when we look at it from the Western lens, in terms of let's get a decision made, let's finalize something, that's not how the meeting is approached from the Chinese eyes. They have a whole different perspective. And we'll talk about that next. My experience from the Chinese perspective, from my business partners in China, whether that's been in a supply chain or an actual joint venture where we're in business together, is that a meeting is where risks are assessed. It's not charting new ground. It's not debating decisions. It's more about aligning. You'll hear the word cooperation all the time in China. It's quite common for business partners, even supply agreements, to talk about the cooperation. And this is where a meeting is really focused on trying to align those goals. And it's not an opportunity to challenge or change directions in a drastic way. It's a step forward and to firm or commit to things that have already been laid out. In some cases, it's a little bit of a hierarchy play. There's an opportunity in the meeting for mid-level managers and their leaders on both sides to get together and finalize what's already been discussed. So it's more of about an alignment, firming up that cooperation, not so much about debate. From a Chinese side, it's more about tone, or checking the reactions, seeing if things are progressing in the right direction. What it's not is an area where you're typically hashing out details. You're not going over payment terms. You're not even really finalizing pricing unless it's the one chance that you're getting together to do so. It's more about aligning together. All the details will be worked out. Well, in a lot of cases, the details are worked out before the meeting ever happens or after the meeting. But the purpose of the meeting isn't the decision. The purpose of the meeting from the Chinese side is alignment, cooperation. So how are decisions actually made in a Chinese meeting? Yeah, they're actually not. in order to get to the decision in a meeting, it's a lot of work done outside of the meeting before the meeting. The meeting itself is just to kind of finalize or make a resolution out of what's already been agreed to. So the decision process is typically done in small groups, 1, 2, 3 people, where any division can be sort of hashed out privately, small group privately. It's not done in front of a group of people. And the reason for that is there's a very strong cultural preference in China to save face. You'll hear this called yanzi. This is where people are not challenged publicly. They're not embarrassed in front of any other workers or leadership. I actually made the mistake one time in writing a report. I was just being factual about a performance where we didn't hit a target, but because of that target was tied to a particular entity, that manager felt like I was embarrassing him. And it wasn't. It was just a clear, very factual statement of where we are at against a goal. But he felt that was a bit embarrassing and shouldn't have been. I shouldn't have handled it that way in that environment. So if there's disagreement or if there's some division, that's better suited to be one-on-one or one-on-two in small groups. And a path forward is charted outside of the meeting. And in those areas, you can, work through differences. Once you get the group together, and particularly in front of a leader, you're not going to see that vigorous debate or challenges or alternatives being offered that would make it look like you don't have an agreement. It's all about trying to get that alignment in the meeting itself. So that's the first thing, is before the meeting. If something new comes up, you're also not going to hash through that inside the meeting. New initiatives are then taken outside of the meeting after the meeting. That's where, again, you can get through any of the details, go through any vigorous debate. I mean, China's not where I'm not saying that they won't argue with you and try and look for alternatives, but the meeting is not where that's going to happen. In the West, certainly in the USA, we have no problem hashing out things in some detail and aggressively in times in a group setting, and it's not taken personally. But in China, again, it's all about the alignment, the cooperation, saving face, and that's not where it's done. So you're going to have to work around any disagreements or any major divisions outside of the meeting. The other part of the Chinese meeting that's not going to be discussed is a sense of hierarchy. Sometimes if a leader has not already granted approval on something, it's not going to be forced on him inside that meeting. That alignment also has to happen outside of the meeting. So it's somewhat about of a risk protection, risk management approach in these meetings. It's to contain any surprises that may occur, put someone in an uncomfortable position from a strong leadership position. So if there's a hierarchical or a run it up the food chain type of decision that has to be made, you're not going to make any kind of progress inside that meeting. It'll be quietly tabled. Oh, they'll address it. They'll comment that, okay, we need to review that. That's going to have to, have some other outside consideration, and then it's going to be immediately tabled. You're not going to get anywhere further in that type of conversation if it has to go up the leadership change or any kind of hierarchy or approval process. If that leader is not in the room there, or even if he is in that room and he hasn't been prepared for that discussion, it's not going to happen. That's going to get all ironed out. So in the meeting setting, it can just be a more firming or confirmation of a decision. So if you have something new, you're going to have to kick that outside of the meeting. If you have something that's going to require a leadership stake and a leadership backing, that's going to have to have been aligned before the meeting. But it's not going to happen fresh and new inside that meeting. So that's something from a different approach, and just understand that's the Chinese cultural approach to these larger group meetings. Plan ahead. So here's some potholes to avoid in a meeting if you're the Western counterpart. I would be careful about pushing things too quickly. If you try to escalate and force a decision in the meeting that the Chinese side is not ready to make, you're not going to make any progress. You're actually going to force a division. Also, if you hear silence coming from the other side of the table, that typically means that they're not prepared to debate it in the meeting room, but they've sensed that there's something that still needs to be ironed out. And silence usually means we're not going to talk about that here. If you force the issue, it's not going to go well. You're not going to make any progress anyway, and all you're going to do is risk damaging some of that cooperative feel or alignment that the Chinese side are trying to get out of that meeting. So don't escalate things too quickly. Don't push so fast. When you start seeing or receiving these signals back, the silence or we need to think about it, a little bit of delay, it means they don't have everything aligned on their side. It may not even be between you and the Chinese side. Internally, in that Chinese company or the managers within there, they have to align privately from their whole side before they can agree to yours. So you may be pushing up against something where they haven't internally finalized or aligned or made a decision or signed off on something that you're not even, privy to or aware of because it's affecting another piece of their, business somewhere, or they have a policy that they need to check. All those things have to be finalized on their side before they can come and agree with us together. So silence, delay, and a little bit of, we need to check on that or let us get back to you. That's all part of them saying they're not ready to make a commitment. And if you push, you're not going to make any progress there. You're just going to drive a wedge that needs to be then repaired later. So if those are the potholes to avoid, here are the things that do work. And you have to look at a meeting with the Chinese partners as sequences or stage gates that you go through. So what you're looking for is forward progress. Find areas that you do agree with and move forward. Think slowly and think about a strategic plan where both sides are moving in the same direction. Again, that's going to require some work outside of the meeting, but look at it from a step-by-step basis inside the meeting. Ask for areas where you're already in agreement. Build that consensus, build that cooperation. The more that you check off in terms of the items that you're already in agreement with, the closer the two sides are going to be. And you're going to take that next step. Even if it's not a final decision in the meeting, you're going to take that next step for them to then go back and try and align outside of the meeting with the direction and the decision that you're looking for. You can offer options and keep things open-ended. Allow for things to work outside of the meeting again. So if you didn't get to the decision that you're looking for and you're not going to push too hard, give a couple of options to consider and ask for them to circle back. Leave things open-ended where you can come and solve the problem later. Again, what you're looking for is moving forward, taking steps forward, and it's not always going to be the final decision in the meeting. It's also very appropriate to say, okay, what's the next step? They'll tell you. They'll let you know what has to happen. Maybe not all the details, but they will give you a guidance on whether we're moving in the right direction or whether there's some problems that need to be worked out. Again, they will do it in a very friendly way to not damage the relationship. They're going to look at ways to save face for you as well. But there will be that path that can be, outlined in the meeting. So if you haven't gotten to the decision that you wanted to yet, it's very good, and I have had a lot of success on asking, okay, what's next? What do we need to do next? So what are some positive signals that you can kind of key in on in a meeting? It's pretty simple, not surprising, and probably something that you can, guess yourself. But if they're asking questions, that's a good sign. They're looking for their own, stage gates, their own areas that they have to clear and understand. If they're asking questions, in their own mind, they are moving forward. One other positive thing, sometimes it looks a little suspicious, but it's not. If you're seeing side conversations going on, if you see two managers or a little whispering, or they're switching into Mandarin if you don't speak Mandarin, and they're discussing things amongst themselves, that's a good sign, because they're looking at how things are being framed. They may have their own questions that they're going to come back with after that, but if they're debating internally in front of you, then they're talking about what the next step is, or what is any other objections or any other questions that they might need to get answered inside that meeting. So that's all very good indications of things that you're taking the right steps forward, even if you don't end up with the final decision in the meeting. Anytime you have continued engagement, that's a good sign. As I mentioned before, though, if you get complete silence, that's usually not a good sign. Someone has identified a problem, and again, they're not going to challenge you in the meeting. They want to save face. So they're going to save that for outside of the meeting to talk amongst their peers. So silence is usually not a good indication, and silence is not where you try and push and try and get to the decision, because you're not going to solve anything at that point in time. However, if the Chinese partners are looking back and forth and then they say we need to discuss things internally, it's not a yes, but they're signaling that they've got things that they need to try and refine and define and come back with further questions, but it's a forward motion. Discussing internally means they're not going to commit in the meeting, but they're taking that next step, and that's a good sign. Don't look at discussing internally comments as being something that they're going to come back with major objections. It's really more about they're agreeing with you at this point, and they want to continue to make further progress, but they're not going to do it inside that meeting. So I hope this video was helpful in sharing my perspective and my experience on how Chinese meetings go, what to expect, and probably most importantly, what not to expect out of the meetings. It gives you some strategic avenues for building consensus and making the meetings as effective as possible by doing a lot of work outside of the meetings. Don't do it in a communal group type of setting. Make sure you align as much as what you can outside of the meeting, preferably before. If you have new items that come up, you're going to have to kind of kick those to after the meeting and establish those common goals. In the meeting, really try to force and move forward on the consensus. It's an area where you can reach agreements. Of course, lastly, if you're going to do most of that work outside of the meeting for getting to those targets and what you're going to then approve inside of the meeting, the most important part of that is relationships. I can share some more in another video, but there's lots of opportunities in China, whether it's dinners or cocktails or other activities where you can build a relationship. The one-on-ones, the small groups, those are where you're really going to have to build trust and build a relationship so that you can get clear and honest step-by-step approaches to solving problems. And then in the meeting, you're just rubber stamping it for a large part. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to drop me a comment or shoot me a DM if there's something I can answer. And we'll circle back maybe on the next video to talk about the whole idea about Guanxi and how relationships are so important in China.